Welcome to Audrey's reading area. Shout out to my grandbabies, Korea, Sanaa, David the Third, and Kaden. I miss you. I love you guys. I pray every day that I get to see you again soon. So, hope you guys are enjoying my videos. I have a very special one today because today's a special day. It's a celebration of a day that happened yesterday on June 19th. They call it Juneteenth. Juneteenth. So I have a special book. What is Juneteenth? Somebody had asked me, what does that mean? What is Juneteenth? Well, I'm going to read it to you now. Don't forget, you guys, to click that like, hit that share, go on over to YouTube and smash that subscribe button for me, you guys. Well, all right. Alexa, what time is Audrey's reading area? She always does this to me, doesn't she? Alexa, what time is Audrey's reading area?
Audrey reads in her area live at 8 o'clock p.m.
Live at 8, you guys. Live. Live at 8. 5 plus 3 equals 8. Live at 8. And here we are, and here we go. So I have this special book that I'll be reading to you. What is Juneteenth? What is Juneteenth? You're going to find out all about it right now. Shout out to everybody, right? Shout out to everybody listening, everybody sharing, everybody clicking like. This book was written by Kirsti Jewell. What is Juneteenth? Written by Kirsti Jewell. It says, which of these facts are true on the back? I'm reading the back. It's a holiday to celebrate June 19th, 1865, when Black Texans finally learned of their freedom. Family gatherings feature red foods like red velvet cake in memory of the bloodshed in the fight for freedom. 89-year-old activist Opal Lee walked around 1,400 miles to help make Juneteenth a national holiday. Wow. So all of those facts are true. What is Juneteenth? Let's jump right in. By Kirsti Jewell, illustrated by Manuel Gutierrez. You can already tell that these illustrations are something else. Really nice. So what is Juneteenth, you guys? June 19 in the year of 1865. See the pictures? There had been whispers throughout Galveston, Texas, that is. There had been whispers throughout Galveston, Texas, that a paper had been signed. A paper granting freedom to all the enslaved people across the southern states. The people of Texas were the last to hear the news that had changed all of the United States. Yes. It was 1865, and Black people had suffered under slavery for more than 200 years. Most northern states had outlawed slavery by this time. However, in the South, it was legal, and white people with money continued to use the forced, unpaid labor of Black people to grow even richer. Although there are several different stories about what actually happened on June 19th, 1865, the one that is most often told says that everyone in town, Black people and the white people who'd enslaved them, were told to gather at Ashton Villa. It had been the headquarters for the Southern Army during the Civil War. A war fought for 4 long years between the northern and the southern states. Some Black people at Ashton Villa had hopes that the war might be over. For some time, the North seemed to be winning. Perhaps that explained why there had been sightings of the U.S. Colored Troops, USCT, a unit of Black soldiers fighting with the Union Army, marching through Galveston. If the North had won the war, what would this mean for Southern states and, most of all, for Black people? Now, Major General Gordon Granger walked onto the balcony overlooking the crowd. He read a handwritten note. Its official name was General Order Number 3, which summarized the famous document known as the Emancipation let me slow down. Emancipation Proclamation. To emancipate people, it means to set them free. That's what emancipate means, to set them free. He said the people of Texas are informed that in accordance with the proclamation from the executive of the United States, President Abraham Lincoln at the time, all slaves are free. Free. As soon as Granger said the word free, black people cheered and shouted in jubilee. They were full of joy because with one sentence, black people learned that they were no longer the property of their white enslavers. The proclamation recognized them as free human beings. Juneteenth. People had begun to dance. Some exclaimed, "Hallelujah!" Others hugged each other and cried. Freedom was a dream that many thought would never come. What they didn't know was that the Emancipation Proclamation had been signed on January 1st, 1863, 2 years before. It took almost 2.5 years for the people of Galveston to find out the news that changed the future of the United States. Why did it take so long for enslaved people in Texas to find out about the Emancipation Proclamation as well as the Union victory 2 months earlier? Location was one reason. Among the Confederate states, Texas was the farthest away. Farthest away from the action of the war. So as Northern troops began winning the war, some enslavers left eastern southern states such as Louisiana and Alabama and moved to Texas. There they started new plantations, which is a very large farm. That's what a plantation is. They brought along the enslaved people they owned to work their new land. One formerly enslaved man named Lewis Love remembered having to leave New Orleans, Louisiana, suddenly after Northern soldiers took over the city. Love's enslaver knew that if his workers were freed, he'd have to pay them. The very next morning, Love said that about 300 enslaved people were ordered onto wagons and moved to Texas. So they knew that they were free, but they moved them so that they wouldn't know. They wouldn't hear about it. They wouldn't know. In Galveston and other parts of Texas, many white people had already heard about the Emancipation Proclamation. However, they purposely kept the news from the enslaved people. They wanted to continue having free work for as long as they could, as long as possible. So they didn't tell them because they wanted to keep them as slaves, keep them working for them for free. Tempe Cummins. Tempe Cummins. A formerly enslaved woman named Tempe Cummins always remembered the story her mother told of learning about her freedom. In 1865, Cummins' mother lived in Brookland, Texas. It is almost 200 miles from Galveston. One day she overheard a conversation between the husband and wife who had held her in bondage. They weren't going to tell the black people that they were free until after another crop season or two were over. Cummins recalled that when her mother heard that, she slipped out of the chimney corner and cracked her heels together 4 times, shouting, "I's free! I's free!" Then she ran to the field and told all the other enslaved people, and they quit work. That was the end of slavery on one plantation. Also, there hadn't been many Union soldiers in Texas to let black people know about the Emancipation Proclamation. They weren't trying to tell people. They weren't trying to tell them their rights. Kind of still do that in the South, here in the South. Even after General Granger made his announcement in Galveston, there were other cities in Texas where it took even longer to hear the news. June 19 in 1865 would soon become a holiday celebrated by all blacks. Wow, it's celebrated by all blacks, black Americans across Texas and across the South. Decades later, it would be honored across the country, a day of jubilee, and it was often called for all Americans Jubilee, a day of jubilee. A holiday named by blending the words June and 19th, and that's how they got Juneteenth. Juneteenth, June and 19th, Juneteenth. That's how they got the name. All right. Centuries of slavery. The years of slavery represent a very dark and cruel time in American history. Taken from the western coast of Africa, the first group of African people were brought by ship to Virginia in 1619. Eventually, they were sold at auctions to wealthy white farmers to work on tobacco farms. Slavery existed in all the original 13 colonies in America. But many years before the Civil War, slavery had been abolished in northern states. No more slavery in the northern states. In the South, black people were forced for long hours to do back-breaking work, picking cotton and planting tobacco. They cooked and cleaned for their white enslavers and took care of their kids, while their own children were also working out on the fields. The Middle Passage. You guys are never going to guess what this is. Maybe some of you know. When people were kidnapped from Western Africa, they were forced onto ships that made the difficult voyage across the Atlantic Ocean. This voyage is known as the Middle Passage. The journey was long and grueling, taking many weeks, sometimes months. Ships carried up to 600 people, chained in extremely tight quarters. There wasn't even enough space to stand up, and so people spent the voyage lying side by side. Can you imagine laying side by side next to people squished up for months? They were fed a little water and boiled rice, just barely enough to keep them alive. Some kidnappers let their captives out onto the deck of the ship for fresh air for short periods of time. But in many cases, the African people spent the entire voyage below deck, where it became extremely filthy. People often died from disease and some were killed. In fact, historians say that up to 2 million people died during the Middle Passage. And if they made it to America, what awaited them was slavery. So this is how they had them lined up, the slaves, how they lined up in the ships. Had them laying out like that. Laying out for months. Any children born to enslaved people were automatically enslaved themselves. They were given scraps for food and rags for clothes. They were not allowed to learn to read or write. That's why I keep telling you guys to pick up a book and read. We have the right to read now and learn. We learn a lot when we read, you guys. What happened if they didn't do as they were told? They were often severely beaten. As punishment, families might be broken up. Enslavers would often sell the parents or the children to other plantation owners across the South. So if you didn't do what you were told, they would take your kids or take your parents and sell them to someone else, and you would never get to see your parent or your kids again. Cruel. People often wonder, why didn't enslaved people run away? Many did. In fact, around 100,000 people escaped from slavery. But it was very difficult and dangerous to reach the North. If people were caught, it could result in torture or death. Torture or death. They tortured them or they killed them if they caught them when they tried to escape. Auctions of enslaved people. Auctioned off black people. Before an auction, enslaved people could be held in a private jail for days or weeks. When it was time for them to be auctioned off, they'd stand one after another on the auction block. Their strength and their abilities would be described by the auctioneer, and the person was sold to the highest bidder. Oftentimes, enslaved families were broken apart and sold so quickly they didn't even have a chance to say goodbye. Family was one of the few things that brought comfort to people during slavery. So when mothers or fathers or children were sold away, it was even more heartbreaking. Families stay together. Stay together, families. When Abraham Lincoln became president in 1861, enslaved people and abolitionists were hopeful. Abolitionists, by the way, were people, both white and black, who fought to end slavery. Many of them lived in the North. Lincoln was known for being against slavery. Plantation owners feared that he was going to make owning black people illegal. After Abraham Lincoln became president, 7 southern states succeeded. This means to separate. They separated from the United States. They formed their own country, the Confederate States of America. The Confederate States of America. Lincoln said states couldn't do this, and war broke out. Y'all can't do that. So wars broke out. Then 4 more southern states joined the Confederacy. Why didn't these states want to remain in the Union? They wanted to keep, this is the reason, they wanted to keep slavery. They wanted to keep slaves and keep people enslaved. They feared that Lincoln would abolish it. They feared that Lincoln would abolish it. Look at this. You see the states and what it means? The possibility of becoming free gave black people in the Confederacy tremendous hope. Lincoln's first step toward the universal freedom was the Emancipation Proclamation, issued on January 1st, 1863. Go to YouTube, I'm live. Why didn't he use it to free from all from bondage? Lincoln was a practical politician. The border states Kennedy, Delaware, Maryland, Missouri, and West Virginia still allowed slavery. I'm going to read those states again. Kentucky, Delaware, Maryland, Missouri, and West Virginia. However, they chose to stay in the Union and didn't join the Confederacy. Lincoln was desperate to keep them from ever seceding. So as not to anger white people in these border states, Lincoln did not free the enslaved people living there. However, all the enslaved people in the Confederacy were suddenly free. They left plantations in great numbers, and many worked for the Union cause, though the living conditions were terrible. Abraham Lincoln and slavery. Abraham Lincoln was president from 1861 until 1865. He was shot and killed by a man loyal to the Confederacy right after the war ended. So they didn't like that he was helping people, and they shot him and killed him. He was helping the slaves. Although Lincoln believed slavery was wrong, he didn't think that black people were equal to white people. He didn't think we were equal. Slavery is wrong, but we're still not equal. That's what Lincoln thought. He believed 2 races were too different to live together. At one point, Lincoln thought about sending all black people to a country in Africa called Liberia. However, this idea greatly offended many abolitionists. They said that it was unfair and wrong to send black people away from a country they helped create. In the end, Lincoln dropped his plan. First came the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed all enslaved people in the Confederacy. Right after the war ended, freedom was granted to all black people in the United States, no matter where they lived. On August 20th, 1862, President Lincoln wrote to an editor of the New York Daily Tribune. He stated, "If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. What I do about slavery and the colored race, I do because I believe it helps to save this Union." So this guy here, this is Horace Greeley, editor of the New York Daily Tribune. Fighting for freedom. Fighting for freedom. In 1863, with hopes of strengthening his army, President Lincoln allowed black men to fight for the Union. By the end of the war, around 198,000 black men served in the military, with 25 winning the Congressional Medal of Honor. Among them was William H. Carney. William H. Carney, February 29, 1840 through December 9, 1908. William H. Carney was born in Virginia and spent his childhood enslaved. Along with his family, he moved to Massachusetts, where they were free. In February of 1863, Carney joined the all-black 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment of the Union Army. A month later, he was promoted to sergeant. In July, after a battle his unit lost in South Carolina, Sergeant Carney managed to rescue the Union flag. He was the first African American to perform a Medal of Honor action. And on March 23, 1900, he received the Medal of Honor for his military service. That was him. Like white women, black women could not become soldiers. But they made uniforms and blankets for Union soldiers. They were also nurses and spies. One famous spy was known as Mary Bowser. Bowser kept her true identity unknown by using many aliases. An alias is a fake name, so people don't know who you are. See her sewing? Bowser was a free black woman who was part of a spy ring led by a white abolitionist named Elizabeth Van Lew. Bowser worked as a servant for Van Lew, but because it was illegal to be black and free in Virginia, she had to pretend she was enslaved. In order to help the war efforts, Van Lew hired Bowser out as a servant to Jefferson Davis. He was the president of the Confederacy. The president of the Confederacy. Mary Bowser with Jefferson Davis and his wife, Verena. This is them right here. While cleaning Davis's home, Bowser found battle plans and memorized them. Then she got the information to Van Lew, who passed it along to the Union Army. Women who worked as spies were huge. They were a huge help in winning the war. The Union finally won the Civil War on April 9, 1865. However, it would take another 2 months for the black people of Texas to learn the news. Now, the question to answer was, what would they do with their newfound freedom? What would they do with their newfound freedom? Like, what do you do if that's what you've been doing your whole life, right? What do you do? They don't even know how to be free. So let's see. Newly freed. Newly freed. Among newly freed people, there were some who stayed where they'd been enslaved. Why was that? Well, they understood how to farm the land where they'd lived so many years. Now they hope to support themselves by working on it as sharecroppers. Sharecroppers farmed a piece of land that in many cases had once been owned by enslavers. They still didn't own any of the land. In exchange for their labor, sharecroppers were given a place to live, maybe like just a shack. They were also given some farming tools and they got to keep part of the crops they grew. It was a very hard life. That's all they knew. Many people considered sharecropping almost like another form of slavery. Still, some sharecroppers were happy to have their independence and no longer be enslaved. Many other formerly enslaved people left their plantations right away. They wanted to leave their old life behind. Didn't even want to think about that slavery stuff anymore. They moved to cities where there might be more job opportunities. Some groups formed their own communities known as freedmen's towns. Freedmen's towns. These towns sprang up across the United States from New York to California. Freedmen's Town in Houston, Texas. Did their thing. A lot of freedmen's towns were in Texas. Often, the first building to go up was a church. Then after that, a school. Freedmen's Town had their own businesses, including grocery stores and barbershops. Besides their belongings, people brought their beloved traditions with them as well, like Juneteenth. Some black people moved to cities and towns to look for lost family members. They went to the state where their loved one had been sent. People put "Have you seen?" notices in black newspapers. Many spent years and even decades searching in the hope of being reunited. Aww. On June 14, 1883, a woman named Polly McRae put a notice in a Louisiana newspaper called the Southern Christian Advocate. It said, "I wish to inquire for my children." Balaam was the oldest, Winnie the youngest. Annie came to Texas and is dead. Balaam was sold to Gilbert Shivers and Simpson Company, Miss on Silver Creek. Oh. I was sold to his cousin Henry Barry and was brought to Texas by James Oatman. My name when I left there was Polly Shivers. I have not heard or seen them since the war. Heartbreaking stories like Polly McRae's explain why celebrating as a family quickly became an important part of Juneteenth tradition. Celebrating as families. You guys got to understand families are important because they did all they could to break us up. Some would gather near the last place where their relatives had been known to live. Today, family reunions remain an important part of Juneteenth. Family reunions. That's right. Important part of Juneteenth. Early celebrations. Juneteenth could have been a day of sadness and regret. In June 1865, some formerly enslaved Texans might have resented being the last to know of their freedom, but black people chose to make Juneteenth a day of joy. Starting in 1866, people from across Texas met in Galveston, where Major General Granger first read aloud General Order Number 3. The first documented Juneteenth celebration was held at Reedy Chapel, a church that continues to hold Juneteenth celebrations today. People came in their finest clothes. In the late 1800s, men might wear elegant three-piece suits while women wore long, beautiful gowns. These gowns often had a high neck, and the most expensive ones were trimmed with lace. Now that they were free, black people could wear whatever they wanted to wear and be as fancy as they liked. When the holiday first started, families gathered in parks or churches. The Emancipation Proclamation was often read aloud to the crowds. People sang spirituals that had been sung in the times of slavery, such songs as "Many Thousands Gone" and "Go Down Moses." Yeah, were popular during this time. Way down in Egypt land, tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. Spirituals. Music has always been important within the black community. When the first people were stolen from Africa and put on ships, singing helped captives, the slaves, soothe one another during terrible voyages. And that's why they say music soothes you. Years later, in the American colonies, themes from the Bible were often part of the songs that became known as spirituals. Slower spirituals about hard times were known as sorrow songs, while upbeat songs expressing joy were called jubilees. There were also songs with secret messages. These coded songs might tell others that there was an opportunity to escape. For example, in Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, the sweet chariot or chariot may have seemed to be about reaching heaven. But when sung on plantations, it was often believed to be code for the Underground Railroad. Sweet Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. Smart. But the Underground Railroad was not an actual railroad, but a system of people and secret locations that helped the enslaved escape bondage. So spirituals helped many reach freedom. For a long time when I was younger and I heard about the Underground Railroad, I really thought it was like the underground, it was a railroad. Like I really thought that. But it's not an actual railroad. It was a system of people and secret locations. Spirituals. Parades have also been a big part of Juneteenth. At the first celebrations, black soldiers who'd fought in the Civil War would ride in front on horses decorated with ribbons. As years passed, the oldest living person who'd once been enslaved was honored. These elders told stories of what their lives had been. They were celebrated for their wisdom and their strength after having survived such brutality. One thing is for sure, you can't have Juneteenth without delicious food. In fact, it has become a custom to serve certain foods. What kinds? Strawberries, red velvet cake, watermelon, barbecue, and red punch. You may have noticed that all the foods just listed are deep red. That isn't a coincidence. The color red represents the bravery and endurance of enslaved people. Red also symbolizes the blood that was shed by black people in their fight to fight their fight to be free. Baseball games, fishing, and sometimes rodeos are common Juneteenth activities. At night, fireworks may explode in the sky. Does this make Juneteenth seem like July 4th, America's Independence Day? July 4th celebrates Americans declaring freedom from the British. Well, the two holidays are very similar. The biggest difference is that Juneteenth celebrates the day when everyone living in America became legally free. Claiming space. Long after all black people were free, often they were still not treated as equals. Even today, huh? Even celebrating Juneteenth would soon be a challenge. But do you think this stopped black people from seeking equality or made them give up Juneteenth? Absolutely not. From Galveston, Juneteenth spread to other parts of Texas and then beyond. Yet sometimes white people would kick groups out of public parks or refuse to rent out spaces for the events. However, even if they could only find a tree to gather under, that's where black people would celebrate Juneteenth. It had not always been this way. Right after all enslaved people were freed, the United States government granted them some of the same civil rights as white people. This was a period called Reconstruction. Black men could vote and serve in public office. 2 black men became U.S. senators. Black people were starting their own businesses. This angered a lot of white people. Then the Jim Crow laws were put into place by the end of the century. This meant that African Americans faced more restrictions on how they lived. This is why it became so difficult to hold events for the Day of Jubilee. In 1872, a group of formerly enslaved black men, they came together in Houston and they made plans to keep Juneteenth alive as well. Alive and well. Nice. Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow laws were created in the South in the late 1800s to keep non-white people apart from white people. This is called segregation. To segregate means to separate. All public places became segregated. They were whites only. Whites only restaurants, hotels, schools, public bathrooms, even water fountains. If people of color were allowed in the same building as white people, they had to use a separate entrance. Jim Crow laws were enforced in the South for decades. So they set us free, but then they made these laws that we can't be with you. We can't go in the same doors. We can't eat with you. We can't drink from the same water fountain. Their names were Reverend Jack Yates, Reverend Elias Dibble, Richard Allen, and Richard Brock. Instead of asking white people to give them space to celebrate Juneteenth, why not purchase their own piece of land? The men pooled their money together between $800 and $1,000, which was a lot of money back then. With it, they bought 10 acres of land in Houston's 3rd Ward. They named this piece of land Emancipation Park. Emancipation Park. See, white people could use this one. Colored people had to use this one, and look at the difference. This one was dirty. They had this one for the whites all clean. Emancipation Park. Yales, Dibble, Allen, and Brock created Emancipation Park. Wow. In Austin, Texas, a formerly enslaved man named Thomas J. White organized a group of businessmen who would work toward owning their own park. They called themselves the Emancipation Park Association. White believed that owning their own land would empower the black community. In 1907, White and his wife, Maddie B. White, bought 5 acres of land in East Austin. Like the park located in Houston, it was named Emancipation Park. Juneteenth celebrations in Austin were celebrated there for 30 years. Now they are held in a nearby area known as Rosewood Park. About 2 hours north of Austin in Mexia, a special organization purchased 18 acres of land specifically for Juneteenth celebrations. The area is now known as Booker T. Washington Park. Black people had been celebrating their Freedom Day there since emancipation. Ralph Long, a black politician from the community, was known for giving speeches from the back of his wagon to an audience of 20,000 people. 20,000 people. Wow. So despite Jim Crow laws in the South, black people found ways for Juneteenth to remain an ever-important part of their history. However, many others chose to leave the places they had always called home and head north, hoping for a better life. So I point up because north is up, north, south, east, west. Juneteenth migration. Juneteenth migration. Right after the Civil War, 90% of all black Americans lived in the South. But that changed. Over time, black people from all over the South migrated and went to live in other parts of the country. See these lines? They're migrating to all different parts. This is west, this is north. Yeah. Where did they go? Is the question it asks. Large northern cities like Chicago, Detroit, and New York were popular destinations. Many people also migrated to cities in California like Richmond, and Los Angeles. The hope was to find better opportunities and escape the racism of the South. From 1916 to 1970, around 6 million black people moved from southern states. This period is called the Great Migration. A black family preparing to move north. This is them. Getting it together, preparing to move north. Although starting a new life in the North, black Southerners brought along their cultural traditions, including soul food, blues music, and cowboy hats worn by Texans. Through the Great Migration, Juneteenth was also brought to new places across the country. In general, black Texans moved to the West Coast. It was easier to travel to cities such as San Francisco and Portland, as well as Denver, slightly north, than to East Coast cities. Once one family member settled into a new place, others would follow. Soon there'd be thriving black communities along the West Coast. In 1915, a boy named Wesley Johnson Sr. and his mother moved from Beaumont, Texas, to San Francisco, California. Their home was in the Fillmore district, where black Southern migrants were quickly creating a community booming with music, art, and delicious food. Later in life, Wesley became a very successful businessman, and in 1945, he organized the Juneteenth celebration on Fillmore Street in San Francisco. This is Wesley Johnson Sr. Also in 1945, Clara Peoples brought Juneteenth to Portland, Oregon. Peoples was born in Oklahoma and moved to Portland to work at the shipyards during World War II. A shipyard is where ships are built. During World War II, many black women were able to get these jobs because so many men were off fighting in Europe and in the Pacific. Peoples was surprised to learn that Juneteenth wasn't celebrated in Portland. So she taught her coworkers about Juneteenth and celebrated with them. After years of work, in 1972, Peoples helped organize Portland's first official Juneteenth celebration. By then, she was a beloved community leader feeding the hungry through her food bank. That's her. In 2011, she was officially named Mother of Juneteenth. Her granddaughter, Janelle Jack, now leads Portland's Juneteenth celebrations every year. The Great Migration brought Juneteenth to the north and out west, where many more black people came to know about the holiday. Unfortunately, the better life that migrants had hoped to find was most often out of reach. A revival, 1968. In the United States, racism could be found everywhere. It can still be found. There may not have been Jim Crow laws in the North and West, but laws still existed that kept black people from having the same opportunities as white people. They were often denied like good jobs, decent housing, and good schools. They were denied. In the 1950s and 1960s, the country went through major changes. Americans from all backgrounds worked together in the fight for equal rights for black people. This period is called the Civil Rights Era. It's so significant because of how much real progress was made. There were waves of peaceful protesters. For example, people refused to ride public buses that, let me just read this before I turn the page, it's a lunch counter sit-in protest. So they're just sitting there protesting. So, for example, people refused to ride public buses that made black people sit in the back. Young black students sat for hours at lunch counters that only served white people. There were marches like the one in Washington, D.C. in 1963, when a very large crowd of 250,000 people demonstrated for fair employment and full equality. Due to the hard work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and many others, Congress passed the Civil Rights Act in 1964, and President Lyndon B. Johnson signed it. A Voting Rights Act was signed the following year. These two acts got rid of Jim Crow laws, banned segregation in public places such as hotels and restaurants, and it ended practices that had kept black people from voting. Here is Martin Luther King Jr. at the March on Washington. But during the Civil Rights era, Juneteenth lost popularity. Why did this happen? Historians have a few explanations. Some think that black people stopped honoring Juneteenth because it focused too much on the past, the time 100 years earlier when slavery ended. The civil rights movement, on the other hand, was focused on the future and securing the rights of black people. Others say that one goal of the movement was to integrate society, bring people of all colors together. In their opinion, Juneteenth segregated black people in creating a holiday just for them. But in June of 1968, new life was breathed into Juneteenth. It happened as a result of a civil rights event that didn't go as planned, the Poor People's Campaign. I'm on my way. Poor People's March on Washington. Wow. The Poor People's Campaign was the idea of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. A large multiracial group of people would march to Washington, D.C. again. This time, the demand was for more programs that would help all poor communities. People who didn't have enough money for food or a decent place to live. Tragically, before the trip to Washington could take place, Dr. King died. On April 4th, 1968, a white man shot and killed him on the balcony of a motel in Memphis, Tennessee. Dr. King's death shook the nation, but it didn't stop his plans. His wife, Coretta Scott King, who was also a leader in the movement, and fellow activist Reverend Ralph David Abernathy, headed up the Poor People's Campaign. On May 13, 1968, 3,000 people from all racial backgrounds, white, indigenous, Asian, Latinx, and black people, set up tents side by side along the National Mall in Washington, D.C. Look at that. This was at a time when many people were still living separately based on the color of their skin. The hope was for Congress to pass an economic Bill of Rights to give poor people a better life. There was also supposed to be a solidarity march on May 30th, but the date was changed at the last minute. The new date was June 19th. June 19th. Juneteenth. The holiday would show that although the emancipation of enslaved people happened more than 100 years ago, many people of color were still oppressed. Did people march? Oh, yes. On Juneteenth of 1968, more than 50,000 people joined the Solidarity March. Mrs. King spoke to the huge crowd at the National Mall about the sickness of racism, the despair of poverty. Unfortunately, Congress did not pass an economic Bill of Rights, but not all was lost. It was at the march that many people first learned about Juneteenth. And so when people returned home, they brought new interest in the holiday with them. Juneteenth went from just being a celebration of the past to a celebration honoring the present and focusing on hope for the future. Juneteenth continued to move into new cities across the country. How is it celebrated today? Well, that depends on where you live. Juneteenth. Celebrations today. Today, in many places across the country, Juneteenth traditions from 1866 continue. Celebrations still often take place at parks. Crowds listen to speeches and march in parades. Games are played and barbecue grills are blazing. The traditional red foods are still enjoyed. After all, does anything taste better than a red velvet cake? See, I didn't even know that about the red stuff. I know now. But as the culture of black people in America grows even richer, there are also new ways to celebrate. Lift every voice and sing. Lift every voice and sing. It's a song written in the 1900s and also known as the Black National Anthem. It may be followed by a hip hop performance. The Pan-African flag with its red, black, and green bands may stand alongside the official Juneteenth flag. Get that cake. He's eating that cake. Juneteenth flag. Juneteenth flag. I'll have one for y'all next year. I sure will. In 1997, Juneteenth got its own flag. Created by Ben Haith, the founder of the National Juneteenth Celebration Foundation, he worked with an artist named Lisa Jean Graff to create a meaningful symbol for the holiday. The flag has a single white star in the center. The star stands for two things. First, it represents Texas, known as the Lone Star State. Second, the star represents the freedom of black people in all 50 states. Around the star, there is a burst meant to look a little like a nova. A nova is what astronomers called a new star. The burst symbolizes a new beginning for black people in Texas. The curve in the middle of the flag represents a new horizon. It signifies that new opportunities lie ahead for black Americans. The Juneteenth flag is red, white, and blue, sharing the same colors as the American flag. It's a reminder that those who were enslaved, as well as their descendants, are indeed Americans. In 2007, June 19, 1865, was added along the right side of the flag to record that all-important date. If you're in Fort Worth, Texas on Juneteenth, you may find yourself at a Miss Juneteen Contest. These contests offer a way for young black women to learn about their pasts. Contestants write essays about black history and bring awareness to causes that are important to them. Winners receive a scholarship to help with the cost of college. The Miss Juneteen Contest started in Texas. However, you can now find them in cities across the country such as Las Vegas, Tampa, and Milwaukee. Milwaukee also hosts one of the largest Juneteenth celebrations. It began in 1971. It started with about 500 participants and now has grown to include tens of thousands of people. It has always been hosted by the Northcott Neighborhood House, which is a community center. Many cities celebrate Juneteenth on a weekend. Milwaukee, however, insists that the holiday be observed right on June 19th, even if it falls on a weekend or weekday. The city's festivities take on issues that are important today. Politicians shake hands with attendees and address major concerns of the black community. It's also been shake hands. It's also been a prime time for registering people to vote for upcoming elections. In Flint, Michigan, you may find yourself playing a large game of dodgeball or competing in a double dutch contest. Double Dutch. Shout out to Double Dutch Aerobics. Shout out to you guys. Look them up, Double Dutch Aerobics. Or perhaps you're part of the annual parade, modeled after the first parades in Texas. Community leaders, entertainers, and church groups all walk, dance, or ride in cars through Flint's black neighborhoods. The co-chair of Flint's Juneteenth celebration, Paul Herring, explained to a reporter of the Flint Journal why he believes Juneteenth continues to be important. He said, I always say, we are the children of those who chose to survive. Double Dutch. That was the thing to do when we were little. Raven Anderson remembers celebrating Juneteenth in her home of Bastrop, Texas, when she was a child. More than 150 relatives from her mother's side of the family get together to cook for their huge family and just enjoy being together. During the day, there's a parade on Main Street, and in the evening, there's a big dance. Anderson is proud that Bastrop's festivities always include everyone in town, regardless of race. For more than 150 years, Juneteenth has traveled into cities and towns across the country. A little different, perhaps, in each place, and yet the same. It's always a day to take pride in being a Black American. Then 2020 came, when the United States, indeed the whole world, changed because of a disease called COVID-19. Yet Juneteenth still took place, even during a nationwide shutdown. How it was celebrated changed, yet its theme of joy remained at its center. Masks on. Jubilee in 2020. So what happened in 2020? Maybe the question is, what didn't happen? In March, the United States shut down to combat COVID-19. Because it is spread from one infected person to others, health organizations said the best way to control new cases was to keep people apart from each other, from one another. Millions of Americans stayed at home. Yep. Offices, restaurants, movie theaters, and schools closed. Yep. For children at home, being in class meant connecting with teachers and other students by computer. If people went to public spaces, the safest thing was to wear a mask that covered their nose and mouth. Because so many businesses could no longer operate, millions of people lost their jobs. They had to worry about how they would have money to pay for rent and food. In the spring, just as people were trying to make sense of the pandemic, there was more tragedy. More tragedy. In late May, a Black man named George Floyd was stopped by the police in Minneapolis. They responded to the accusation that he had used a fake $20 bill at a store. Police officers forced Floyd to the ground. One of the police officers, Derek Chauvin, killed him by keeping his knee pressed hard on his neck for about 9 minutes as Floyd pleaded for his life, saying he couldn't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. His murder was recorded on a young woman's phone and shared across social media. And quickly, there were huge nationwide protests against police killings of George Floyd and other Black people. Earlier in the year, let me just show you the pictures. This is George Floyd again, who that police officer killed. I can't breathe. Stop killing us. No justice, no peace. I am tired of this. Justice for Ahmaud and Breonna. Black Lives Matter. They say Black Lives Matter because they've been treating us like our lives don't matter, like we're nothing, and just killing us. So we're trying to open their eyes and let them know we do matter. Our lives do matter. Black Lives Matter. Yes, so stop killing us because our lives matter. That's what it means. Early in the year, a Black woman named Breonna Taylor was shot dead by police as she slept in her own bed in her own apartment. And a Black man named Ahmaud Arbery was pursued, meaning chased, and fatally shot while jogging in Georgia by 3 white men. 3 white men chased him, shot and killed him. They said, oh, we thought he was going to rob somebody, which he had not. And they just killed him. These killings were brutal reminders that although slavery was long over, Black people still couldn't live lives free from dangers that white people never had to face. They never had to face it. They never had to be scared. Speeding on a highway, they could just speed. They don't have to worry about it. We do. Although the pandemic of 2020 was still raging, the murder of black people couldn't be ignored. And so, in response, people of all races and backgrounds put on their masks and marched through the cities such as Louisville, Minneapolis, Oakland, and Detroit. Black people fighting for their safety and for fair treatment is not new. So why did this movement feel so different? Well, this time it seemed like more people, no matter their color, were paying attention. Plus, we got it on video. We have cameras in our phones now, and we're able to record these things. How about that? Many parents of all backgrounds were having conversations with their children about the history of racism in this country. On Juneteenth of 2020, 2 years ago, protests were still going strong. There was a larger, louder conversation happening about racism. Why was a greater percentage of black people getting COVID-19? A greater percentage of black people getting COVID-19 than white. Were doctors giving the same care to black people as to white people? Juneteenth was getting more attention because while it celebrated freedom, it also raised an important question. Were black people truly equal in the United States? In Prospect Park in Brooklyn, New York, people of all races used Juneteenth to go on a bike protest in honor of Black Lives Matter, BLM. BLM is an important organization created in 2013 by Opal Lee, Alicia Garza, and Patrice Cullars, working for racial justice, often through protests that put pressure on the U.S. government. Meanwhile, only a couple of miles away in Fort Greene Park, hundreds met with their masks on and enjoyed music. So this is Patrice Cullars, Alicia Garza, and Opal Lee. Black Lives Matter creators. Many attendees had been protesting only days before, but now took time to celebrate and focus on joy, like at the earliest Juneteenth gathering. Due to the pandemic, many cities such as Denver and Portland held Juneteenth events online. Houston replaced its usual parade with a virtual one. Concerts and readings of the Emancipation Proclamation were enjoyed via a computer in people's homes. So look at this. They are Zoom, anybody? A family might have a barbecue or watch a movie about Black history. It wasn't the same kind of celebration with large groups together in person, but it was still the same important holiday. With new energy directed towards Juneteenth and more attention paid to it, people started to wonder why Juneteenth wasn't a national holiday. In 2020, the governors of Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, and Virginia made it a state holiday. Companies like Twitter, Nike, and Target gave their employees the day off on Juneteenth for the very first time. If July 4th was a national holiday, a day that recognized some Americans' independence, shouldn't there be a holiday for the day that everyone became free? Oh yeah. Officially Juneteenth. Al Edwards. This is Al Edwards. Although celebrated since 1866, Juneteenth wasn't recognized by a state government until 1980. Which state do you think was the first to do so? You got it. Texas, of course. Texas. Al Edwards made it happen. Edwards served in the Texas House of Representatives from 1978 until his death in 2020. He introduced a bill in 1979 that he hoped the state government would pass to make Juneteenth official. Some people, however, chose not to join his efforts. A black minister known for leading huge Jubilee celebrations did not help Edwards. He, like many others, didn't think that Texas lawmakers would take the bill seriously. Also, at the same time that Edwards was working on the Juneteenth bill, others were trying very hard to make Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday a federal holiday. A federal holiday means that the day is recognized by the U.S. government and all government offices are closed. The U.S. government had yet to honor any black American in this way. Would trying to make both days an official holiday be too distracting? There were worries that the holidays were competing against each other. Edwards, however, believed that both days should and could be honored. Following the spirit of the formerly enslaved, Edwards never gave up. In 1980, Juneteenth became a state holiday in Texas. For all his work, Edwards earned the nickname Mr. Juneteenth. And this is Al Edwards with Miss Juneteenth in 1980. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, MLK Day. Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King. This is them. After Martin Luther King Jr. was killed in 1968, Coretta Scott King worked with lawmakers to make his birthday a holiday recognized by all 50 states. In November of 1983, President Ronald Reagan signed a Martin Luther King Jr. Day bill, making it a federal holiday. So now you guys know when it was made a federal holiday, November of 1983. MLK Day was celebrated in 1986 for the first time as a federal holiday. Still, each state decided whether or not to take part in the holiday. It took until 2000, 32 years before every state joined in recognizing it. Dr. King's birthday is January 15, but the holiday is always on the third Monday in January. The third Monday in January. From then on, all government offices were to close on MLK Day, as well as all public schools. The day honors the hard work Dr. King did for everyone, not only black people in the United States. The hope is that people won't simply take the day off, but will get involved with their community, perhaps by working in a neighborhood garden to help further the cause of service and equality in America. By 2020, every state except for North Dakota, South Dakota, and Hawaii formally observed Juneteenth in some way. The next step was to make Juneteenth a federal holiday, just as MLK Day and July 4th are. It's fitting that many of the people who led the fight were from Texas. One of those Texans is Opal Lee, a retired teacher who grew up in the cities of Marshall and Fort Worth. Born in 1927, she has wonderful memories of going to the local fairgrounds on Juneteenth with her family. Lee understands about people's fight for equality because of her own life. At the age of 12, Lee and her family bought a house in a mostly white neighborhood. Many of their new neighbors didn't like the Lees moving in. One night, 500 white people threw rocks and set her family's home on fire. No arrests were made, but of course, this had a huge impact on Opal Lee. Lee has dedicated her life to serving people as both a teacher and a Juneteenth activist. In 2016, at the age of 89, Lee walked from her home in Fort Worth to Washington, D.C. That's 1,402 miles. This is her picture, Opal Lee. Juneteenth. Can you imagine doing that at that age? At the age of 89. Strength. She did this to bring attention to Juneteenth and her goal of making a federal holiday. Each day she walked 2.5 miles to symbolize the 2.5 years it took for the news of emancipation to reach enslaved black people in Galveston. Another supporter determined to make Juneteenth a national holiday is Texas Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Every year, Jackson Lee tried to get Congress to pass a bill that would make Juneteenth a federal holiday. The bill is called the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act, and as of 2020, it was supported by more than 80 other members of Congress. In 2020, she told a reporter from the Time magazine, "One thing about national holidays, they help educate people about what the story is." What Lee means is that more will learn about Juneteenth and its importance to all Americans. So take another look at her. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. In 2021, all the hard work of Congresswoman Jackson Lee, Miss Opal Lee, and many others paid off. On June 17th of 2021, President Joe Biden signed the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act, making Juneteenth a federal holiday. Woo! Yay. Yay! The act was effective immediately, making Juneteenth 2021 the first year it was a national holiday. How will you celebrate Juneteenth this year? Or should I ask, how did you celebrate Juneteenth this year? That was yesterday. Spent it with a lot of people, family, and friends at the pool. The pool. Juneteenth celebration. Juneteenth celebration. How did you guys celebrate it? And I hope you guys had fun. Here's the timeline of Juneteenth. I'm not going to read it. I'm going to show it. And you guys can pause and read. Pause and read. Wow. Here's a bibliography. I'll show it to you. You can pause and read it. And here are some pictures with the flag. Look at that. Pictures. I'm going to show you guys pictures of the Juneteenth celebrations. This one says a Juneteenth celebration in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 2018. The pictures. A Juneteenth parade float in Galveston, Texas. Ashton Villa in Galveston, Texas. Wow. Look at this. The Juneteenth Freedom March and Celebration in Seattle, 2020. The year 2020. A stilt walker during a celebration in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Stilt walker. This one is performers dance during a Juneteenth celebration in Brooklyn, New York. Brooklyn, New York. Wow. Mr. and Miss Juneteenth during the 2021 celebration in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. A Juneteenth barbecue in Boston, Massachusetts. People look at the original Emancipation Proclamation at the National Archives building. Wow. If you ask me, that kind of looks like Rosa Parks. I could be wrong, but that right there looks like Rosa Parks looking at it. I don't know. I don't know if that's her or not. This is the Emancipation Proclamation. Can barely read it. It says, first page of the original Emancipation Proclamation. This is a print of a famous painting somehow showing enslaved people learning of their emancipation. Enslaved people learning that they've been emancipated. Wow. 2 African American sergeants in the Union Army. A game of tug of war at a Juneteenth celebration in Riverside, California. They're playing tug of war. Aw. Opal Lee, who worked hard to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. You go, lady. Beautiful. What a beautiful soul. Beautiful lady she is. She did it. A statue of William H. Carney in Norfolk, Virginia. Sheila Jackson Lee, U.S. House Representative from Texas. Beautiful. And President Joe Biden signs the legislation to make Juneteenth a federal holiday in 2021. 2021. That is him signing it. Wow. The end. The end. All right, all right, all right. I don't want to hold you guys anymore. Thank you for being here and listening to What is Juneteenth? Now you know. If you didn't know, you know. What is Juneteenth? Woo! Don't forget, click like, click share, go on over to YouTube and smash that subscribe button when you find Audrey's reading area. Shout out to my friend Greg Robinson. Thank you, Greg, for joining me and supporting and commenting underneath there. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your love and support. Thank you. Once again, go on over to YouTube to Audrey's reading area and smash that for me. That little subscribe button down there. Click on it. Subscribe. Well, all right, all right, all right, you guys. I will see you again tomorrow live. Live. Live at 8. Yes. And hope you guys had a good listen. Shout out to everybody that was here and everybody that shares this video. Thank you so much, and I will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow. It's only one day away.